Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing incredibly well. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, I sit up in my bed. My back is as straight as a pencil. My ears perked forward to attention like a dog. I heard a sound. I was sure of it. It sounded so close, but what was it? It was too close for comfort. I feel slightly unsettled. It's as cold as ice when I lean over the edge of my bed, my feet meeting the wooden floor, which is why my grandmother is always telling me to wear socks to bed, especially now that the autumn is upon us here in the Bluegrass State. It would seem the warm summer days belong to the past, as if the sun has retired for a season and is taking a much-needed respite. There is a distinctive, very pronounced chill in the air. I glanced down at my blue pyjamas, covered with red London buses, with writing all over the pyjamas, with places like Piccadilly Circus, Mayfair, Kensington, all scribbled over the fabric in a decorative scroll-like print. They were a gift from my mother when she returned from London recently. I've never been to London, but I have a thing about buses, especially bright red London buses. Even my duvet cover has not escaped my zealous passion and ebullient enthusiasm for London buses, as it's also covered in exactly the same identical fabric as my pyjamas. And if that isn't enough for you, there are 2 model red London buses standing in pride of place on the shelf next to my dresser, that my mother bought for me from the famous toy store in Hamleys in London. I also own a plethora of other model cars and a bright red fire engine, but the London buses are an absolute favourite with me. I guess I just love the bright red colour. I wish our buses here in America would be a bright red colour like this. I also like the conspicuous bright yellow taxicabs of New York, so I own a few models of them as well. I shiver again. I feel the distinctive drop in temperature. My grandmother's right. I should wear socks to bed. She always insists that going to bed with socks on your feet gives you a much better night's sleep. The moonlight is filtering through a crack in the curtain, peppering its silvery blue like shadows over my room, that bounce off my cupboards in an ethereal luminescence. I can see everything distinctly, as the soft night light is also on in the passage, the object being that I can see my way clearly to the toilet in the middle of the night, without being too intimidated by the dark. I think my grandmother thinks that because I'm only 10 years old, going on 11, that it's a given or set in stone, if you like, that I must be terribly afraid of the dark. She told me she could never get to sleep without a light on when she was a young girl. She always believed there were monsters hiding under her bed, waiting to grab her. I've never been scared like that of the dark. But I never told my grandmother that. I don't want her to feel bad about being such a scaredy cat when she was round about my age. I'm a lot braver than she was. I can hear the noise again, a rustling, flapping sound. It's so close it could be coming from inside my bedroom. I feel a bright smile stretching itself across my face like a large elastic band being pulled incredibly hard, as I've just heard a familiar hooting sound, and my hope escalates. Could there be an owl on my windowsill? I tiptoed towards the window, twitching the curtain back ever so slightly. Thankfully it slides back along the railing, without making much of a sound. But there she is. She's perching on my windowsill, as I'd hoped. She's quite a big tawny white owl, with distinctive brown markings along her feathery plumage, with a large, wide, magnificently transfixing pair of golden eyes. But she seems plucky, audacious. She's unafraid of me. She hoots, remaining perched on my windowsill for a while. For a moment her head swivels around in my direction. Her round golden eyes meet mine. I feel a strange soulful connection as our eyes lock. I'm certain she's not abashed by me, for she remains perched on my windowsill for what seems like an awful age, as if she's quite comfortable and at ease in my presence. Then I hear a flapping sound as she stretches out her wings and flies away. I walk towards the window, peering outside my grandparents' backyard to see if I can see where she went, but she's gone. The accented light of the moon makes out the silhouettes of the barn, the long expanse of the meadow, fringed by the dense black vertical forms of the tall imposing trees of the wood grove that are so ambiguous in this foggy haze that we call night. I suddenly realise I'm thirsty. Thoughts of warm chocolate milk and cookies flood through my mind. My stomach grumbles in eager anticipation of this pleasing suggestive thought that I'd gladly like to bring to fruition. I stumble awkwardly towards my closet, fumbling around in my drawer, pulling on a pair of socks, easily balancing on one leg at a time like a flamingo, as I roll one sock after the other upon my feet. I reach for my navy blue velvety dressing gown, hanging behind the hook of my bedroom door. I throw it on my shoulders, tying the belt around my middle in a rough knot. The tall oakwood grandfather clock that stands proudly in the hallway chimes midnight. But as I trudge down the staircase in my socks, I can hear the soft mumble of chatting voices. My grandparents must still be up, which is surprising, as they're usually in bed by 10. I stealthily move towards the living room and peer through the door. I can see the 5'4", slightly rounded figure of my grandmother wearing her faded old pair of blue jeans and a white coverall sprinkled with paint, with her grey hair pulled away from her face in a messy ponytail. She's standing in front of the wooden easel, which supports a medium-sized canvas, holding a paintbrush in her hand, dappled with yellow-gold paint. She assiduously focuses all her attention on the autumn leaves of the oak trees, trying to encapsulate the rich resplendent colouring of the leaves on their boughs at this time of the year, which she wants to get absolutely right. She's painting a picture of the barn, with the Rhode Island reds and Brahma chickens pecking the ground in the foreground for worms. She has been working on this canvas for a couple of days now. She's not actually a bad artist. It's a good likeness of our barn, with the red oak trees that stand behind the barn, against a cloudless cobalt blue sky. My grandfather is sitting by a crackling fire that looks like it's hanging on for dear life to its last red-orange embers that bespeckle the chalky grey crumbling timber as the fire is burning itself out, with faint wisps of spiralling grey smoke that rise up into the chimney pane. My grandfather has a bulbous brown cigar in his mouth. He's filling the room with a familiar white pungent smoke, while he's glancing through yesterday's paper. I don't know why Emma is even bothering to pick up Parker tomorrow to take him back to New York. Why does she even consider doing so? She doesn't even want anything to do with her son, my grandmother is saying. My blood runs ice cold. They're talking about me. They're discussing my mother's obvious indifference insouciance about picking me up in the morning. They rarely think that at 10 years old I'm naively unaware of my mother's heedless detachment and impassivity towards me. It certainly doesn't take a rocket scientist to discern whether someone wants to be around you or not. I always hated when my mother picks me up to take me back to her fancy apartment in New York City, in the highly esteemed Tribeca neighbourhood that has been so lavishly decorated by a high-profile interior designer. But it looks more like a luxurious hotel suite than a home. It lacks so much personality, and the wholesome homeliness you find in a natural, cosy space you can call home. It's the kind of place like a picture in a magazine catalogue, that is so perfect you feel like you can't relax, in case you soil the sofa with chocolate stains from melted ice cream on the pristine white fabric, that will show up every detail of the dirt so conspicuously. I can see that my mother picks me up to take me to the airport for the 2.5-hour flight to New York, because that's what a mother is supposed to do, as she dutifully exercises the muscles of her maternal duties like a gym workout she resents having to undertake, but she does so anyway. When I'm in her presence, I sense I'm a burden to her, a responsibility that she could well do without in her hectically busy life. My mother's an international journalist, travelling to war-torn areas of the world. I sometimes see her face on the news as she discusses world events. If you ever feel sorry for people who make it their passionate mission to travel to far-flung corners of the globe, to get caught up in the heart of potentially dangerous situations and appear to be rushing around in a frantic frenzy, you need to know that they're there because they want to be. They're inspired and enthused by drama and action, For them, it's like a quintessential adrenaline rush that gives them a physical high. I know it's true. I've seen it in my mother's journalist friends. It's like they can't get enough of living on the edge, rather like those people engaged in daredevil pursuits, like hanging from a falling plane, flying through a mountain, free-falling 220 feet in an airbag, or jumping Snake Mountain on a motorbike. For to these adventurous people, rather like my mother, being at home for an extended period of time is like a fate worse than death. So don't ever feel sorry for them, for they love living on the edge and dicing with death. It makes them feel alive. Well, that's what my mother always says. "Well, you know what our daughter's like," I hear my grandfather say. "She's always had ants in her pants. Never could sit down for a moment when she was a little girl. It was like she was always on the go. Had to be doing things all the time. It would drive us both potty. Don't you remember? She was also such a tomboy, climbing trees, getting into no end of scrapes. Parker, well, he's so different, that boy. He reminds me of myself at his age. He can just sit down patiently and watch the world go by. But his mother, if she's not doing something, she's not living." "You don't happen to think that our daughter might suffer from ADHD? Attention deficit disorder, I believe it is?" asked my grandmother. "There's so much about it these days on the news." "Oh, absolutely not. That would imply that our daughter cannot focus or concentrate. If something holds her attention, no one can focus better than our daughter Emma. No, our daughter's only problem is she's easily bored. I think she finds looking after Parker exceedingly dull. I'm quite sure she's dreading picking him up tomorrow morning. More's the pity. Parker is a delightful boy, but she doesn't see that. He's wasted on her. He deserves a mother that will really appreciate him." At that poignant moment, my grandmother looks up. Her eyes meet mine. I can't help myself, but tears begin to erupt in my eye sockets, spilling down my cheeks. There is nothing worse than feeling like a baby, but I cannot pretend my mother's lack of interest in me has not been cutting. But hearing my grandparents talking about my mother's apathy and affirming what I've always clandestinely known is like adding salt to the wound. It stings. For some reason, I've always blamed myself for not being interesting enough to hold my mother's attention. I've seen how the other parents at school interact with their children. My mother has never been like that. As for my father, I know nothing about him. Neither does my mother. I know I was conceived in Italy, when my mother had a drunken fling with a perfect stranger, and subsequently fell pregnant. So who my father actually is, well, let's just say it's anybody's guess. For even my mother has no memory of that night, when she got so bladdered under the stars in Italy, and rather over-familiar with a tall, dark, handsome Italian stranger. My grandmother's crinkled face furrows with lines. Her blue eyes soften. She puts down her paintbrush on the palette, rushing towards me, enfolding me in her arms. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. You weren't meant to hear that." She wipes the tears from my eyes and directs me towards the kitchen, where she warms up some chocolate milk for me and places a couple of chocolate chip cookies on a plate. She takes a seat opposite me on the oakwood kitchen table and reaches out to hold my arm. "Now, sweetheart, what you heard is true. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. You're a very clever young man, and I would never dishonour you by trying to pull the wool over your eyes. Your mother loves you in her own way. You know she does. But she's never been demonstrative or good at expressing love, and emotionally she's exceedingly withdrawn. What I would describe as dispassionately detached, which is a good thing for the kind of job she does, as she cannot afford to allow sentiment to subjugate or prevail over her purpose, which would be easy to do if she's reporting on poverty in Africa and exposed to the devastation of starving children, which is ultimately distressing to witness. Your mother has to have a tough skin like a rhino. I assure you, her indifference towards you is never personal. You must know that, sweetheart. She's as equally nonchalant towards me and your grandfather. She's always been like that since she was a little girl. That's part of her personal makeup, of what makes her uniquely who she is. Your mother is not like the rest of us. She's not like regular folk that enjoy the practicalities of everyday life. Your mother likes to live in a world where she's on the edge of danger, in the firing line, doing exciting things that would make most people recoil in horror. The way you have to look at it, sweetheart, is we're all different. It's not good, nor is it bad. It's what it is. But it does mean that being maternal is not your mother's strong point. That's why she doesn't want to hang around with me. I'm too boring, I say, another tear spilling down my cheek. Now don't you start talking like that. You're not boring at all. Don't you ever think like that, do you understand? I nod. I'm sure we're all boring in your mother's eyes. As to her normality is dull, which is why her life is a yo-yo of serendipitous experiences where the unexpected is a likely occurrence every day of her life. Your mother likes that element of surprise, but predictability is rather too dull for her. Granny, I don't want to go back to New York with Mummy. I want to live here all the time with you and Gramps. Can't I stay here? I hate going back in Mum's apartment. It's horrible. I always feel I'm in the way there. I don't want to feel like that anymore. I really hate it there. I hate it. Please can I stay here with you forever? You really don't want to go back to New York with your mother? No. Please don't make me, Granny. I never feel comfortable with Mum. She's like a stranger to me. I tell you what, I'll speak to your mother for you and see what she has to say about the matter. My grandmother's account. My daughter was never easy. A difficult, demanding, highly strung child growing up. She was driven by an inquisitive curiosity, an inquiring mind, a galvanizing, audacious drive to be doing something adventurous with her life. She would have the startling, mind-blowing propensity or predisposition to get very bored. She needed her mind to be perpetually stimulated. As a mother, I was always searching for ways to keep her interest focused. When she acquired a job as an international journalist, it was like she was living on her adrenaline rush that she had been searching for all her life. Needless to say, she thoroughly embraced this brand new journey with a zealous enthusiasm and zeal, and blossomed after having found a vocation that stirred her passion, opening up doors of venturesome, intrepid opportunity to explore newsworthy events around the globe. She adored her job and was always on the move, chopping and changing, welcoming in new experiences. My daughter was certainly not the kind of person that would ever want to settle down to the bog-standard, humdrum, mediocre predictability of what she would presumptuously consider the drudgerous routines of conventional daily life, which included getting married or raising children that most of us would gladly welcome and embrace as part of the rich tapestry of life. But not my daughter. Ostensibly it was just not written in her DNA, and she admitted as much, confessing that if she was ever to have kids of her own, she would be the world's worst mother. A divulgence of hers upon which I heartily agreed. So when my daughter announced one day she was pregnant, my heart sank, especially when she couldn't even identify who the father was, as I believe emphatically whenever possible, every child should be raised with a father and mother figure. My daughter was determined to have her baby, but she ended up passing her son over to us, which we never minded about at all. Indeed, Parker is like a son to us, and we couldn't envisage our lives without him, as he has been a blessing and a gift. When Parker overheard us talking about his mother, his true underlying emotions bubbled to the surface. I realized that he was mindfully aware of his mother's aloof insouciance towards him, which I assured him was not personal and had nothing to do with him, which he began to appreciate and accept. I think for him being able to express his true feelings about his mother's lassitude was cathartically healing. When he expressed no desire to spend time with his mother, we discerned that Parker needed above all else stability, security and love in his life, without having to periodically go off and stay with his mother, yo-yoing between Kentucky and New York all the time, which we knew long-term was no life for him. Fortunately, after talking to my daughter, she agreed that her son remaining with us would bring him the stability he desperately craved, so he would remain permanently in the countryside. My daughter would visit him when she wished. For the first time in ages, I was able to see my grandson really blossom and come to life on the farm, where me and my husband have resided over the last 20 years. I raised all 3 of my daughters in New York. When my husband retired, we decided to move to the bluegrass state of Kentucky, as my husband fancied the idea of growing his own vegetables, and any excess we would sell organically at the farmer's market. We also were desirous to have a couple of American quarterback horses that we could ride regularly, and in truth, we never looked back. I thought living in the countryside would make me miss the cosmopolitan allure of New York, but I surprised myself how seamlessly I adapted to life in the countryside, and how much pleasure me and my husband extracted from growing our own food, that not only enhanced our health, but our sense of accomplishment as well. Recently my husband grew a 500-pound pumpkin in our backyard, where since then we've grown a plethora of different vegetables with remarkable success. Our farmhouse is a wooden symmetrical affair, painted in a pale lemon yellow, with white wooden windows and shutters, and a black slate roof. On the lower elevation of our house, we have floor-to-ceiling windows, along with a wraparound porch, with white balustrades. I wanted large windows throughout the property, to embrace the spectacular transfixing views, overlooking the billowing verdant valley, and the pretty meadows where our horses frolic away happily all day long. In the furthest distance our fields are flanked by a fabulous wood grove, consisting of dogwoods, oaks, pecan nut trees, beeches, hickory, and maple trees. Our barn is situated adjacent to our farmhouse, along with a large carport and a stable block. The whole area is richly paved with a combination of red brick and contrasting white pebbles, which is aesthetically very pleasing. Over the last few years, I've become friendly with a woman who lives in the neighbouring farm. One day she came to visit me for her regular cup of coffee that we enjoy together every Tuesday morning. On this occasion she seemed terribly excited. She drove her truck down our long driveway, parking directly outside the front door. Mimi is a woman in her early 60s. She's a keen horse rider. I'm used to seeing her attired in jodhpurs, a cotton shirt and riding boots. I think living in those clothes is a standard uniform for her, as she gives horse riding lessons every day to her students, and more recently she's been teaching Parker how to ride. As we sit down to enjoy our coffee together, Mimi looks like she's bursting to tell me something, and then she comes out with it. "I think I saw a Bigfoot yesterday," she tells me. "A Bigfoot," I say. "Aren't those things, well, aren't they fictitious?" "Well, I never thought they were real," she admits to me. "But after my experience yesterday, I realise they have to be. If they're not real, then I don't know what the hell it is that I saw. It was when I was giving your grandson Parker his riding lesson. I noticed something was watching us from behind an oak tree, that was looking particularly magnificent with its golden leaves, I hasten to say. I was focusing on the lesson with Parker, but in my peripheral vision I saw a head peeking out from behind the oak tree, about 70 feet away from the riding ring. I could see this human-looking head, with a pointed tip, peering at us curiously, as if fully engaged in watching the lesson. Its dark eyes seemed keenly focused on your grandson. I think Augustus, my horse, actually sensed his presence, as on 2 occasions he willfully actually stopped and looked in the direction of the tree, and he neighed. But I'm glad to say it was like a friendly acknowledgement from my horse, as if he was saying, 'Hi, you there behind the oak tree, I know you're there.' Augustus is a very social horse, you see. I don't think Parker noticed anything, so I never said a word to him, but I don't mind admitting that I barely concentrated on that lesson. My hands were trembling so much. It's not every day you witness a Bigfoot on your property." Mimi's eyes grow round. She grabs my arm, giving it a tight squeeze. "So there I am, trying to focus on the riding lesson, but I'm failing abysmally. My heart is thundering in my chest because I can feel that Bigfoot is watching us. I don't want him to know that I know he's there. I'm afraid to scare him off. I have the sense he's benevolent, but very evasive, and seems to be so focused on watching our riding lesson. Goodness knows why. My mind is shouting at me, 'Don't look or he'll run away.' But another part of me is saying, if you don't look, I might not get another chance. So I turn around and look directly at the creature. He stepped away from the tree. For a few fleeting seconds I see him. Oh my God, it was definitely a Bigfoot. Easily 8 foot tall, incredibly big, lofty, graceful, magnificent. For a moment my eyes meet his. Even from that distance I could see he had the most beautiful eyes, the colour of treacle. He turned around and glided away, but when he moved, it was like he was floating on air. I couldn't believe what I'd seen. Look at me. I'm still shaking from the experience. How extraordinary, I say. But are you absolutely sure you weren't seeing something else? Mimi looks annoyed and very disappointed when I express my doubt and misgivings. I'm sure I saw a Bigfoot, she says. For if it wasn't a Bigfoot, then I don't know what else it could possibly have been. But after she's confided her story to me, she becomes increasingly despondent, as she senses my cynical doubt, and is quick to change the subject. But I can see the hurt in her eyes that my scepticism has clearly provoked. I don't know what to make of my neighbour's claims. The idea of Mimi seeing a Bigfoot seems nonsensical, but when I discuss it with my husband, he laughs at the idea, dismissing it out of hand, insisting my friend must have seen something else. But judging by my friend's insistence on what she saw, my doubts are lessening significantly. Back to Parker. My grandmother kisses me goodnight on the cheeks. These days I sleep a lot easier, as I'm so glad to feel assured that my permanent residence is here at the farm with the people I love best in the world, whom I consider my parents. It makes me feel so much more settled. I fall asleep and awaken with a start, as if something has given me a sharp nudge. I sit up and am certain I've heard a sound, a light banging. I sit up in my bed, my ears attentive, my heart skipping in my chest. I'm hoping that I'm being visited by the owl again, whom's been visiting me quite regularly, but I haven't seen her for the last couple of days. Maybe she's back and is making her presence known. I hope so. I always leave a crack in the curtain to allow the moonlight to filter through the room, so I can surreptitiously pull the railing back, very, very quietly, watching my owl friend perched on the window pane. I hear the noise again. It doesn't sound like my owl friend. It's coming from downstairs. I'm sure I can hear something or someone shuffling around outside the farmhouse, and occasionally it sounds as if something is actually banging our wooden rafters. I know it could be raccoons ferreting around and thumping things, but then again, it might just be something else. If there's anything that I've inherited from my mother, it's possibly an investigative mind. If I hear a strange noise, what others might reject or dismiss out of hand, I need to check in order to uncover the mysterious source, otherwise I won't be able to sleep. It's cold this morning. I know it's morning as my cell phone is registering 2:30 a.m. I've been sleeping with socks on at night, but I can't help but notice the pronounced chill in the air. I rise out of bed shivering so much that even my teeth are chattering. I know winter is well on her way, as so many of the fabulously beautiful golden leaves from the trees of the woodgrove are beginning to fall onto the ground, layering the earthen floor in a plethora of golden confetti. I grab my dressing gown, throwing it over my shoulders and tying the belt around my middle in a big knot. I hear the banging sound again. Someone is walking around our farmhouse. I even hear the white pebbles being crunched under ponderous feet. Someone is out there, but who? And at this crazy time of the morning? This conundrum warrants investigation. I want to find out who or what is outside our farmhouse, loitering around in the dark shadows. I don't know why. I'm not even scared. Fear does not bridle my bit. Instead, I am overwhelmed with an unblemished curiosity that demands my attention, seizes my focus so that all other wavering insecurities and doubts are expunged from me, like the water being squeezed from a sponge. I dart down the sweeping staircase as fast as I can. I nearly trip over a toy mouse that one of my grandmother's mischievous marmalade cats has left lying precariously on the step, eager to trip me up. I stealthily slip past my grandparents' bedroom door on the lower floor where they prefer to sleep, which is always left ajar. I peer cautiously into the room. 2 marmalade cats are lying fast asleep between 2 lumpy bodies that are both snoring. Thankfully, they're both fast asleep. I need to be careful not to wake them up, for they wouldn't appreciate me creeping out of the house at this early time of the morning when it's pitch black outside. I race towards the front door, throwing on a pair of boots that are lined up underneath the coat hooks where various outdoor heavily padded coats are hanging. I tiptoe to the door, unclasp the chain, twisting the key in the lock. It makes a loud clicking sound. I stand still for a moment and then turn the key in the lock, pressing open the door ever so slowly at first, Thank God it doesn't squeak. My grandfather has oiled the hinges very well. I'm greeted to blasts of icy cold air, thrashing my face like icy hands. I carry a flashlight in my hand and venture cautiously outside the front door. It's my turn to crunch the white pebbles, laced artistically between the red brick paving. I can hear the rustling of autumn leaves, blowing in the wind, as the trees behind the barn are swaying briskly, their boughs jiggling up and down, while fallen leaves are blowing up in the wind like celestial butterflies. Then there's the distinctive sounds of crickets and frogs serenading the night. I'm trying to be as quiet as possible. If someone's out there, I don't want them to see or discern my presence, nor do I want to draw attention to myself by making a conspicuously different noise. It is a dark night, but there is enough moonlight to discern the shape of the barn, along with the vertical dense silhouettes of the trees that define the fringes of the woodgrove. I flash my torchlight around the house. I see a dark, obscure figure crouched down on our patio, its head pressed against the glass pane of our sliding doors. Oh my God! Someone's looking right into our home! I'm frozen to the spot. I come to the horrifying revelation that this dark stranger, whoever he is, dressed in a black woolly outfit with what looks like a black balaclava over his head, is planning to break into our property. Maybe he could potentially hurt one of my grandparents. I am gripped with a dreadful horror as my mind flashes before me with scenes of gruesome horror movies I've seen in the past, where vindictive evil men with sawn-off shotguns break into people's houses to bring about scenes of graphic carnage. I shudder at this very thought, my eyes squeezing tightly shut. I can't believe this is happening. This is hauntingly surreal. I don't know what I should do. I can taste the bitter bile rising up at the back of my throat as every cell in my body is held hostage to terror. I better get back into the house as quickly as I possibly can, right now, before it's too late. I have to wake my grandfather up at once so that he can get his hunting rifle at the ready. Call the police. I turn around. I creep away stealthily, back to the house, as quietly as I possibly can. But a pebble comes flying towards me, hitting me perfectly on my back. I now know I've been seen. My heart begins to thud violently in my chest, like a very fast drum roll. I turn around to find myself standing a few feet away from this Herculean-sized silhouette that is like the hugest dark shadow that you've ever seen in your entire life. What on earth is it? It's so intimidating. It's easily over 8 foot tall, but I can only see its outline. I want to scream as loudly as I can, as this black dense silhouette is the most terrifying thing that I've ever beheld. I try to scream, but my voice box has been seized from me. No words emanate from my mouth. I physically tremble, and slowly, very surely, I reluctantly draw the light of my torch onto this thing's face, whatever this thing is. My grandmother had been afraid of monsters as a girl. I had dismissed monsters, the idea that monsters could possibly be real. But now I'm not certain. I might be staring at one. This creature is like the most incredible hulk. It's covered in long, flowing, relatively dense hair that is as black and shiny as a raven's feathers. The creature is trying to cover his eyes. My torchlight is bothering him immensely. But when my torch leaves his face, dropping to chest level, it is then that I see his face clearly. I'm expecting to be staring into the eyes of the devil himself, for only the face of evil can be seen from a body as daunting and as imposing as this, surely. But I'm taken off guard, like a surfer being flung off his board. I'm staring at such a human face that has the look of an Indian warrior, a face ruggedly handsome and noble-looking, with high cheekbones, a sloping forehead, deep-set hooded eyes. But it's his eyes that confound me the most. They are benevolent, kind, very kind, which seems incongruous to the daunting, terrifying shape of this beast that I am beholding. I know what this is. I've heard about these things before. It's a Bigfoot, but it can't be anything else. It's indicating for me to follow him, but can I trust him? I'm torn between a rock and a hard place. I remember hearing in church from one of the pastors there that even the devil poses as an angel of light. Could this incredulous, idiosyncratic creature be luring me to a deadly trap? But another scripture bolts into my head. By their fruit you will know them. The creature has kind, beautiful eyes. He exudes a warm energy. Surely evil cannot be hidden behind kind eyes. Are not eyes the window of the soul? The tenacious creature is indicating for me to follow him again. I am surprised, but I do, for any fear I had moments before has been ripped away from me like a band-aid off a scab. I find myself intrigued, rather curious. It could be a duplicitous, guileful trick, I know, and that thought does whisper into my mind, but I willfully ignore it, as I hear the thought in my head, by their fruit you will know them, again and again. I'm now following the creature into the woodgrove. He beckons to me, and there he leads me to a tree. Lying under the tree, wrapped up in an animal skin, is a tiny white puppy, which the critter retrieves from the ground. He picks the puppy up and hands it over to me, still wrapped in the animal skin. The puppy is incredibly cute, a white ball of fluff. I take the puppy in my hands, and in my head I hear the words, I chose you. I chose you. I'm sure I imagined that voice, but it didn't feel like my voice. The creature glides with me to my farmhouse and watches me take the puppy indoors, and then it retreats back to the woodgrove and is gone from my sight. As I enter the house, I bang the front door loudly behind me and cry out to my grandmother, Granny! 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 My grandmother comes charging out of her bedroom with her dressing gown in her hands. She looks panicked. She looks terrified. She looks very, very concerned. Her face is paled. She looks like she's about to have a coronary. What's happened? Is everything all right? What's going on? She throws on her dressing gown, relieved to see the expression on my face is animated, so she physically begins to relax. It's a puppy, I say, smiling at her jubilantly. Please can I keep it, Granny? Don't you ever do that again to me, Parker. You scared the living daylights out of me, calling me like that. Look at the time. It's dark out there. Where on earth did you find that puppy from? She says, unrolling it from the deerskin. The puppy is squealing. It's tiny, but incredibly cute. I think he needs something to eat, says my grandmother, going into the kitchen to prepare him some puppy food. A Bigfoot gave her to me, I say. A really nice Bigfoot, Granny. My grandmother's face pales. Parker, that's not funny. Don't make stuff like this up. Is this because you heard me talking to your riding instructor? No, what you talking about, Granny? What has my riding instructor got to do with a Bigfoot? Well, she claims to have seen a Bigfoot watching you during your riding lesson. I must admit I thought her story was preposterous, but you're saying a Bigfoot physically handed a puppy to you. I'm only inclined to believe you, as who on earth would wrap up a puppy in a deerskin like that? That's what I'm saying. I saw him close up, Granny. He definitely was a Bigfoot. He was really nice. His body was very, very scary, but his face was so nice. His eyes, so kind, Granny. Well, I never, says my grandmother. You live and learn something new every day. The world is so full of surprises. I think I owe an apology to your riding instructor for disbelieving her testimony. In the days that follow, the little puppy is a delight to behold, and I take him wherever I go. One morning, as I'm in the grassy meadow playing with my puppy, for a brief moment when my attention is diverted and my back is turned, a huge hawk descends from the sky, and in her talons she's picked up my puppy. My heart flips over as I behold this horrifying scene. This is the stuff of nightmares. Surely this can't be happening. Before I can even reflect on the gravity of what is unfolding, I hear a loud, raucous, inauspicious scream, and then I see a stone being hurled up into the sky, which hits the hawk, who instantaneously, out of shock, releases her grip on my puppy, and then from behind a tree, the Bigfoot runs towards the puppy that comes dropping from the sky. He catches it in his hands like a ball. The puppy is crying. That was not a pleasant experience for her, by any manner of means. The relief I feel is immeasurable. The Bigfoot hands me back my puppy, whom I decide to call Chance, as she's had a second chance at life, despite the odds stacked against her. Since that rather curious incongruous event, I haven't seen the Bigfoot again, But I know he's out there in the woodgrove somewhere, watching over us. In hindsight, I believe he selected Chance to be my dog, which was why he was spying on me during the riding lesson. My grandmother believes that in some way the Bigfoot alerted me to his presence that night, when he tried to get my attention. For even when I went into the yard, he was looking into the living area. The fact that he disabled a hawk from stealing my puppy leads me to believe he was watching over the little thing, even after he'd given it to me, to make sure I was looking after it well, and that it was safe. One day, as I was in town with my grandmother, I brought my dog along with me for a walk, and I encountered another dog, a breed known as a Labradoodle, and my dog was the splitting image of this dog in every way, apart from the fact that the other dog was a boy and mine was a girl. But they looked like they were related. We got talking to the woman, who told us she'd recently bought the puppy from a local woman in the area who didn't live very far away from us. All the puppies had been boys, with only one girl that was born to the litter. She had wanted a girl, but unfortunately she couldn't have one, as one night the puppies were walking around in the backyard, and a coyote grabbed one of the puppies, the only girl in the litter. It was ironic that the puppy that I have was a girl, which leaves me to ask this one question. Did the Bigfoot who gave me the puppy, that he saved from a hawk, also save the puppy from the mouth of a coyote? Is it not possible? If that is indeed the case, it may seem that it's not only cats that may be afforded many lives. Chance has grown up to be a beautiful dog. I'm now 15 years old. I'm glad to say my relationship with my mother has grown in leaps and bounds. You see, now I appreciate her personality. I don't take offence to the fact that she's not the settling down type of person. I do find it much better when she visits me on the farm for a few hours or so, once in a while. And that has meant that I know when she's visiting me, it's not out of duty and responsibility, but because she genuinely wants to see me, which makes a world of difference. To date, I'm glad to have been raised on the farm by my grandparents. I love living in the countryside, and because my grandparents are the mother and dad I never had, I've come to the realization that not all people are meant to be parents, which may be why the Bigfoot was very particular in finding the right owner for Chance. I'm of the opinion that some animals are meant to come into our lives, and Chance was clearly meant to be mine. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.